Okay, we also learned about how many verses there are in the Bible about money. We know there's plenty. I think the biggest thing that we started with is about being a generous giver. It's very important. The life verse that I use for our business, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. It's actually on my card and everything. Um, we must tithe from our first fruits, right? It's not just tithing, it's tithing from your first fruits. That was very important. The principle of tithing, I think we've covered that pretty well now. Is anybody not tithing? No, kidding.
Good job.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's why you should. It's blessed versus cursed. Keep going. Then we got into the actual financial stewardship, budgeting basics, paying yourself. We're going to cover a little bit about debt today and compound interest. We'll go through that. We did everybody use the budgeting sheets this week, right? You guys all filled it out? Yes? No? Maybe? I know we even filled one out for our son. Tracy told me that she did that with our son. So we talked about the percentages, right? It's really important that you don't get too far out of whack and keep them within. Now, mind you, when we talked about those percentages, we also talked about the flexibility, right? Because the budget's not there to control us, it's to kind of keep us in line, right? So don't use it to control every little thing that you do, but it keeps you an idea. We talked about paying yourself. That means savings. Very important how that works. And this is where we left off. We left out own versus loan. So when it comes to your savings and what you can do two things with it. You can do ownership. In other words, buy something that you can then resell for something else, or you can lend your money to somebody. For example, loanership would be if you wanted to borrow some money, I gave you some money. I'm not owning anything. I'm actually giving you, you're giving me a promise of paying in the future, right? So that's that, and that would be checking, savings, money markets, CDs, bonds, fixed annuities. One of the things we talk about when it comes to CDs is I hear this story all the time from my 80-year-old clients. It's like, yeah, I remember when CDs used to pay 16%. That wasn't that long ago, by the way. That was in the early 80s, right? Now, one of the things about that is when you talk about interest rates, and we call what we call real returns. So when you were getting 16% back then from the bank, that sounded pretty good, right? But what were home mortgages? About 16%, right? So you're breaking even. And what was inflation back then? Anybody know? About 18%, that's right. So you actually were losing money. So get that. The bank was paying you 16%, but you were actually losing money. Think about that. Today it pays you 1, if you're lucky, or 0, but inflation's basically been 0, so you're almost even. So believe it or not, today, putting your money in the bank getting nothing is actually ahead of what you were in 1982 getting 16. Makes no sense, does it? Right? Because most people always, all my 80-year-old clients, they all say, I wish it was like 1982 again when I was getting 16%. I said, yeah, but you were losing money. They're like, no, we weren't. We were getting 16%. Like, yeah, but inflation was beating up your money. Anyway, so that's on the ownership side. On the ownership side, most people have, once you get your life together, job, a career, you'll go out and buy a house. So that would be real estate. Then some people get into stocks. If you're on Robinhood app, everybody's into stocks these days. Who was telling me earlier that they bought like $1 worth of stuff on Robinhood? I didn't even know you could do that. So you could buy like $1 of a stock. Yeah, so that seems a little odd to me, but yeah, it's a fraction of a fraction, right? If you're buying Apple, that's like a thousandth of 1%. Okay, so stock ETF, stock mutual funds, and variable annuities. Let me talk a little bit about variable annuities real quick because they're actually very prevalent along with fixed annuities. So fixed annuities is you give your money in a contract to an insurance company and they guarantee you a certain amount of return for the length of the contract, for example. So they might say, if you give us 100,000, we'll give you 3% guaranteed for the next 10 years. You're not gonna lose any money and we're gonna guarantee you 3% growth. Not bad. A variable annuity says, well, hey, we're not gonna give you 3%, but we promise you won't lose money and we'll give you a portion of whatever the stock market does in returns. So if the market's up 10%, we'll give you like 3. But if the market's down 3%, we'll still give you 0. Sounds pretty good, right? But here's the thing, is A, they're very costly, number one. And two, a lot of times we know that the market can go up and down, right? But what if you have a year where the market was up 29%, for example, right? So they say, well, guess what? The most we're going to give you is 5 or 6. So they keep the other 22%. And they know that the odds are that if they keep that portion above and beyond, they're going to make a ton of money. You're going to feel secure, but they make more money than you, right? So that's called a variable annuity. So one of the things about variable annuities, when you're out there, lots of good insurance agents are out there talking about these. In our industry, we say insurance, variable annuities and fixed annuities are never bought. They're sold. So they sell you an idea that sounds really good until you start breaking it down. Let me give you a story. So, and I think I might have mentioned it before, but I had a doctor in my Rotary Club, and I was always trying to get him as a client, you know, because I thought I would be good for him. Anyway, so one day I said, hey, Dr. So-and-so, can I take you to lunch? I'd really like to earn your business. He's like, Jose, I don't need to talk to you. I'm set. I'm good. I'm really good with all my investments. I'm like, really? That's good. Good to hear. Why do you say that? He says, well, I'm guaranteed 6% for the rest of my life. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good, considering rates were only about 3 at the time. I said, okay, sounds good. What do you mean? He goes, well, my buddy, my golf buddy, he sold me this product, and when I retire, it's guaranteed to return 6% no matter what. I said, that sounds pretty good. I said, I wish I could buy some of that for my clients. Could you bring it in so I could see it? He goes, absolutely, I could come show it to you. Not a problem. I said, but I'll need to see the contract. He said, yeah, I'll bring you the contract. Okay. Brings it to me. It's about $680,000. In it, he had already lost $200,000. Right? Now he's guaranteed the top number. As I'm going through, I said, what's this say right here? He says, well, that says, you know, M&E fee, management fee, and on and on and on. Total was about 4% annual fees, right? So he's like, yeah, but I'm getting 6% guarantee, so who cares how much I can charge? I said, okay, no problem. What's this line say? And he says, And it says, extra fee. I'm paraphrasing because it says something else. I'm like, just out of curiosity, how much is that? And he gave me the number per month. And I said, now let's add that up for the whole year. Gave us a number. Now let's divide that by how much money you have in the account. How much do you think the charge was? 6% annually. So you're paying 6% to get guaranteed 6%. That's pretty good, right? Not good. Yes, he has paid himself first. Here's the unbelievable part about that. He really, really thought he had a good product. He literally started crying in front of my front desk because he felt snookered, right? He felt like he'd been lied to. And he hadn't been lied to. It was all in black and white, but he'd been misled in the sense that he understood it completely incorrectly because that's how it was sold to him. It was true he was getting 6%. They just didn't tell him they're going to charge him 6% to get the 6%. Right? So anyways, long story short, he took the contract after composing himself and he said, I'm going to, you know what, to that guy that sold it to him. I said, no, you don't need to do that. I said, what we need to do is figure out how we can get you out of this thing. And we went through some process. It cost him about $90,000 to get out of it by the time it was all said and done. Now, mind you, it was actually better than what he had because if you add that up, 4% plus 6%, how much was he paying annually? 10%. So that's why his account kept going down, which was the accumulated value. And it sounds good because they showed him the 680 over here, but the actual value of what his contract was worth was much less. That's what I mean by variable annuities and why we don't like them. In our firm, we never sell them. We don't use them. And the only time we do use them is for somebody who can't get out of a contract. We'll roll it into a cheaper contract so they can save some money. But other than that, I would never, ever, ever, ever recommend anybody buy a variable annuity for lots of reasons other than those. Real estate, we already know about. How many people know about stocks? What a stock is, right? Okay. So when I first started in this business, a lot of times I had to deal with a lot of clients that didn't know too much about stocks. So one of the things that I'll talk about today is that A lot of people say, well, Jose, stock market is way too risky. That's just not for me. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to spend any or invest any money in that just because I don't like it. It's like gambling. I said, all right, okay. So Dimitris, I would come up to you and I'd say, okay, you don't want to be in the stock market, it's too risky, but I see those glasses are some Tom Fords that you're wearing. I see you're wearing some Nikes and some Adidas shirt, all of which are corporate America stocks, right? Actually, Adidas is international, but okay. Or they'll be drinking their Starbucks, right? Or having a Pepsi, right? I think Pure Life is Coke or Nestle right there, right? So in other words, every single day you give America corporations your money, but you don't want to own them. That makes no sense to me, right? So here's what I used to say. So if you're going to go out to Starbucks, to a restaurant, by the way, almost all restaurants are, especially chains, are owned by some company, right? Walmart, Target, I mean, you name it, they're all corporations that you can own a piece of. So what happens is, as you spend your money and other people spend their money and those companies make money, what happens to the stock owners? They get to have stocks increase, right? So why wouldn't you invest in something that you're already spending money on? So that argument kind of went out the door, right? We're like, well, wait a minute, they're just too risky. Yes, they are, but you're spending your God-given money every single day to buy things. Why not buy something that'll pay you back for what you're spending, right? Exxon's a great stock to think about because we drive our cars every day, right? We put gas in. I go to Exxon all the time. No plug there for you, Abel, but that's what I do because it's close to the house. It's close to the house, but it's a corporation, right? So if I own the stock, I'm buying gas, but guess what? I'm also increasing the value of my ownership. So that's common stocks. Now, having said that, there's lots of ways to buy stocks, right? You can buy them individually. For example, you can buy Apple Corporation, which is the largest stock in the world right now. Or you can buy them in a group. And I heard this from my partner was doing a planning session for his client's 13-year-old son. And he was trying to explain how to understand ETFs and mutual funds. And he was like, he's giving him all these different things. And the kid looked at him, he says, oh, you mean like a bundle? Ding, ding, ding. Yes, like a bundle. So a stock ETF or a mutual fund is basically just a bunch of stocks put together like a bundle in different structures, but that's really what it is. And that's really how we recommend you buy stocks, not individually because they can go up and down, right? Or if you're, what was the one that went under in Houston? Enron, that's right, Enron. If you bought Enron, you did pretty good for a little while and then down to nothing, right? So we always recommend that you don't do it all in one spot, that you do it as a bundle. Sure, Sam, go ahead. Uh-huh. Yeah. So let me get the question is, how much you should buy if you have $10,000 in stocks, and is there a way to buy them without being risky? Okay, well, answer number one is, what did I just say? Stocks are risky, they do go up and down, but I think over time, that risk gets reduced. For example, if you go out 15 years in the stock market, generally speaking, there's never been a 15-year losing streak since stocks started. Now, if you go out 1 year, you got a pretty good chance of losing. But if you go out longer term, less time. Second question was? Stock is risky. Oh, but you asked me how much to invest if you had 10,000, right? Well, that's a great question. How much should I invest if I have 10,000? And the answer is nothing. All right? Because if that's all you have, you shouldn't be putting in the market. Now, if you've done all the other things that we talked about, your budgeting, your savings, your tithing, all the other stuff, and now you have extra 10,000, then yes, then you should invest that 10,000. And that's when we're going to talk about ETFs and mutual funds next week. Okay? But I got off subject a little bit. So because really what I want to do, I asked if anybody did their budget, right? Budget. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is how do I get out of debt, right? Because there are quite a few Americans, and the stats show over 70% of Americans are in some kind of debt situation. And so what we're going to talk about today is how to get out of debt using your budgeting tools that we talked about. We're going to turn to Proverbs 22:7. And it says, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Wow, pretty strong, no? So in other words, we talked about master and all that before. It's kind of the same thing, right? You're a servant to the master, to the who you owe money. So like for instance, if I lent money to Abel and Abel owed me, whether he likes it or not, I've now become the first priority, right? Because you got to pay me off before he's free again. In other words, that's what I get out of this. But I'm not going to go too deep in it because I want to get to more of the investment part. But there is a lot to say about debt because I have a quote up there. It says, debt is normal, be weird, Dave Ramsey. You see that up there? And I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan to some extent. I'll explain why, not 100%. But one thing he is doing in America is he's getting people out of debt. Right? It's really, really not a good thing, as we just read in the word, to have debt because you're a servant to that debt, right? Or to that person who lends you the money. So the first thing you must do, if you did your budgeting, is to pray about guidance from the Lord, right? Because one of the things that I do see with a lot of people is they want to attack debt on an emotional level, right? I just got to get rid of it. I can't take it anymore. I got to get rid of it. Well, that's not how you got it, right? You have to kind of realize that there's a way that you can go attack the debt without being so emotional about it, although it does put a lot of stress on a lot of families. So first of all, pray for the Lord's help and guidance. That's absolutely number one. Two, determine what your debt is costing you and establish a budget. Here's the thing. I've run into a lot of people where they say, yeah, I have some debt, but it's not really that bad. And then they say, yeah, but then I have this, I have this, I have this, and I have this, and I have student loans, and I have this. And by the time they pile it up, it's a lot of debt, right? So the first thing you got to do is realize how much debt do you have, right? If you don't know what you have, you can't really get rid of it, right? Kind of if you didn't know you had rats in your house, you can't get rid of them, right? So once you know, though, what do? You go after it, try to get it out of there. So third thing you must do is list everything you own. Okay, so now once you know what you owe, I want you to list everything you own. And here's why. I gave you a sheet earlier. You should have it. It said something about net worth, right? So on the sheet, and most people, believe it or not, are worth more at 18 than they are at 40. Did you ever know that? Notice that? Why? Because most people at 18 don't have any debt, right? So whatever they're making is positive, so therefore their net worth is higher. But list everything you own. Okay, Sam, I'm starting to understand now a little more about you here. Yeah. Okay, so list everything you own, list everything you owe, okay? And why do we need to list everything we own? Here's one of the reasons that you want to list everything you own is because as you're tackling debt, one of the first places you can go is if you have something you don't use or don't need anymore, sell it. Get some money, get some cash so you can pay down the debt. The freedom that you feel from that, believe me, will help you in the long run. So for instance, if you have, four-wheeler sitting in the garage that you ride once a year and you have, X amount of thousands of dollars in debt, sell that thing, right? If you own it. Now, if you owe it more than you own it, then that's another story, which can happen, right? Establish a payoff schedule. Here's one thing that's really important about paying off debt. And what I'm telling you isn't something that I learned in a book, by the way. I've actually lived this. Now I'm going to open up a little bit. I haven't, I haven't had a perfect life like most of you know, but I've been in debt before. I've been in huge debt before. I've lost a business before. Fortunately gone through a divorce before. There's lots of things that happen that all of a sudden that just piles up. And it feels so heavy, like, man, am I ever going to get out of this, right? But that's really, I think, we talked about the mammon. I think that's mammon telling you you're never going to get out of it, and too bad. But God says, if you follow what he's taught us, that we can get out of it, right? And so here's the key number one when you're trying to get out of debt. Pay off your littlest debt first, okay? Now, a lot of planners will tell you, find out what your interest rate is and pay off the one with the biggest interest because you're losing money, right? But here's the problem with that. Usually that's also the biggest debt, right? So it takes years to pay that off. What we try to do when we're consulting with people is we say, look, get a couple of wins under your belt. Get that first one done, right? If you owe $500 on a credit card that you've had on there forever because you just didn't pay attention to it, you pay $10 a month and it's still $500. But if you pay that off, now you can use that payment to start paying the bigger one, right? And it feels like, oh, phew, got that one out of the way. No more new shoes for you, honey. Sorry, that's out. So when it comes to paying debt, I would say the number one thing that people do wrong is they try to attack it without really having a strategic plan. And I would tell you the first thing that you can do to overcome debt is attack that very smallest debt that you have. Once you've listed them all, if there's one's 5,000, one's 3,000, one's 2,000, then you have one over here for like 250. Get that one out of the way. Don't let it keep eating up your interest in debt. So that's key. Next is, so on the payoff schedule that we talked about, we're saying small to large. The reason I say small to large is because everything we just talked about. But also on the schedule, you need to sit down and say, okay, how much am I going to put towards debt, right? Because sometimes what we do is we'll make car payments, we'll make house payments, we'll credit card payments. At the end, we're like, wait a minute, I got no money left. What can I do now, right? So you really have to sit down and actually schedule it out and maybe pay a little less to one and more to the other until you start, eating up those small ones out of the way and get into the larger ones. Now, I've used the same plan before myself. I've taught it to a lot of clients, and invariably it works and gets them out of that debt cycle. Now, here's the bad part. Unfortunately, a lot of times they get right back into debt, right? Because although we have a plan and we got the debt down, we didn't change here and here, right? We're still spending. We're still doing everything. That's why everything we talked about, putting the Lord first and doing everything that the Lord has asked us to, so that we can change our heart and attack that. Because if you have that change in your heart, you'll know that you probably shouldn't buy XYZ on credit when you don't have the money, right? And unfortunately, we see that all the time. And we get them off of credit, they're all cleaned up, and then whammo, they're right back into it again, right? Because they never changed. So consider another way to attack the credit is consider other income. Well, what's that mean? Get a second job, right? That's what that means. Do something that creates income for you, whether it be a side hobby that you can now earn some money on. Whatever you can do, take some extra hours, take some extra overtime. And I always hear people say the same thing, but Jose, I'm already working a lot of hours. I'm like, hey, I didn't get you in the debt. I'm just trying to help you get out of the debt. And the only way to get you out of the debt is to pay it off, right? And so unfortunately, sometimes we got to make some sacrifices. Our son right now, he's okay, but he's right at it, right? He's not really moving ahead or backwards. So what does he have to do? More hours. He does work on a little bit of commission, so earn more commissions. But all that he does get can't be counted on every month. So we tell him, like, pay down your debts, keep some money aside. Don't count on that every month. But if you have extra hours or another job, I don't know how you feel about spouses working. I think many of them do, so that's okay. If she's not working, maybe she takes on a second job as long as kids are okay and taken care of. But anywhere you can get some other extra income, and it could be for a short period of time, right? So for instance, even if you get a second person that's working, let's say they make 20 grand, and if all that earned goes towards the debt, you can knock down debt pretty quickly. So the key is make a plan and get some other income in there if you can. Now, the other thing we talked about is controlling credit cards. Credit cards is the #1 problem for debt in America. It's trillions of dollars. Okay, it's not billions, trillions of dollars that's out there in debt. And they can be okay, but 99% of the time, if you don't pay them off every month, I don't recommend you have them. Right? Every once in a while, you might be able to, make it over 1 or 2 months. But remember, credit cards are notorious for telling you, oh, don't worry about it. The interest rate's only 12% or 10% or 3% or 0% for a year, right? That always gets you on that one. 0% for a year, don't worry about it. Oh, by the way, you didn't pay it off in a year, bammo, now you have this huge interest rate, right? They're easy to use. That's the other problem. But control them. Don't let them control you. Another way to get out of there is be content, right? Now, this was really hard for me, believe it or not. For years, it was difficult. It really was. But I think, and I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I am to a point where I know if it's good or bad, whatever I have, I need to be content, right? If it's nice, not nice, doesn't matter. It's all God's anyways, right? We talked about that. Being content can actually help you, because part of the problem with debt is that when you're not content, you're always trying to get something else, right? Wow, you just see that Chargers shirt's on Able? I really like the Chargers. I need to get me one of those shirts. I don't like the Chargers, by the way. But, it's just the world we live in. Commercials every day. I mean, every day. You need this, you need that. You need the iPhone 12, you need the iPhone 14. I don't know. It just keeps going, right? It's always bombarding us. And one of the things that I know, that if I go to a mall, I'm going to go out there buying something. So if I don't go to the mall, I'll probably buy something online, but that's beside the point. So the idea is, if you don't have the money to spend, stay away from it. Don't covet other people. Work within your budget. Don't worry about what everybody else has or doesn't have. Be content with the Lord's giving you, because the Lord has you just where he wants you right now, right? So be content. And don't give up. One of the things that we find with debt control or trying to pay off debt is people give up. And that's why we say get the small ones out of the way, because it gives you a little bit of a win. One of the things that I see a lot is somebody will come in and say, well, Jose, we have $150,000 in debt. I'm probably going to lose my job this week. And, I just don't see the point of it, right? But even that situation, the Lord can turn around if you just follow the plans that we give you. Anything can be turned around. You got there to begin with. You can get out. And that's really important when I say don't give up. Any progress you make towards your debt is good progress, because it's less debt that you have. Even if it's $50 a month that you can put at something. Add something to it. Don't let it keep growing. Okay. When it comes to debt, we'll finish up with Proverbs 3:27 and 28. And it says, right, the next page over from where we were before. So it says, withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give thee, when thou has it by thee. In other words, attack that debt and don't put it off, right? If you owe somebody, one of the things that we teach our kids is, if you owe something, don't hang up the phone and don't talk to that person, right? See that? I've seen that. I see that from clients. They're like, I don't want to talk to them. Well, you owe them money, right? Figure out, talk to them, be honest with them. One of the things when I was in debt is I did talk to the collectors in the area. I said, look, going through a divorce, my job's kind of not so good right now. I can send you $100. Well, we don't want $100. You owe us $2,000. Well, I understand that, but I can send you $100. Honestly, that's all I have. And a lot of times, if you're honest and stick to what you say, they'll take it. Because what are they going to do? Not take it? Right? No, sorry, don't want it. Right? But it's important that you be honest. And if you have the capabilities, and we do, because we got in trouble ourselves, nobody got us there but ourselves, pay it. Whatever you can do, you can't ignore it. One of the biggest things I see with debt is people just ignore it, right? They don't want anything to do with it. They kind of put, how did I get here? Well, you did it, right? Now, let's talk about good debt versus bad debt. Well, we talked about bonds earlier. So if you lend somebody something to invest in, probably good debt. House, generally speaking, is a good debt. If you saved how much for the down payment? 20%, that's right. Now here's the thing. Why do you think banks require that you put down 20% for the most part? Not all, but for the most part. Why do you think that is? Well, that's one of them. Yes, you gotta put some skin in the game, right? Yeah. It's actually to protect you against the downswing, right? Because banks know that if they give you 100% and the market goes down 10% next year, what is the likelihood that you walk? You're probably going to walk. We saw that in 2008, 2009. People didn't just, keep paying their house when it was down 30%, right? They walked. So they know that they got to give you that cushion from the get-go. And so that's why we say that. It's that if you're going to buy a house, make sure you have the 20% so that you have that cushion, right? Because if you take a 100% loan and the market goes down on you, you're like, I'm paying this house and I could go across the street and buy one cheaper, right? Because prices came down. So that's why that 20% is so important and why banks do it. It's not because that's just their system and they're geniuses. No, they know that real estate can go down in a given year, so they're going to do that. So let's talk about FICO credit scores. How many people know their FICO score? Everybody should. Everybody should hold up their hand. If you don't know your FICO score, we got problems. Here's why. Yes. One, your FICO score is how people tell how good a person you are to lend to, right? I believe that we should have good scores because that means we're paying our bills, right? So a FICO score, a very good one is anything above 800. A very good one, 740 to 749. The average in America is somewhere around, 687. That's the average. 90% of all lenders use the FICO score to rate you and see if they're going to give you a loan or not. So here's how factors into the credit score, because a lot of people don't know this, right? So timeliness or payments, that's the number one way that you can lose your FICO score down. Okay, so pay your bills on time. Okay, don't try to stretch it to when they give you like 4 days extra, just pay it. Credit usage, how much of your credit are you using, right? Because I know for me, I have like 15 credit cards, not because I love having 15 credit cards, because over the years, you get one here, if you don't use the other one, you get another one, and you don't ever turn them off. There's a whole nother reason why you don't do that. So I have all these credit cards, so I own nothing on any of them, so I have ability to spend a lot of money real quick, right? So that could also affect my score because now I have all this credit availability, but whether I use it or not, it can affect my score, right? Depending on what my income is. The average age of credit, how long have you had the credit, right? The older the account, the better. So if you just got your first car, the person giving you the credit's probably not going to be overly excited about giving you a second car, right? So the age of it also matters. Total number of accounts matters, right? If you have 2 or 3 accounts, that's one thing. If you have 35, that's another. And here's the thing is, it can be good or bad for either one. Because if you're in your 50s or 60s, you probably have about 35 accounts, right? Because over the years, you bought cars, you sold cars, you bought houses, sold houses. You have credit, that's what they mean by accounts. Credit inquiries. Everybody know that when you're trying to buy a house, the last thing you want to do is go buy a car at the same time, right? Because you're checking credit for both things. Here's the thing about credit inquiries. As long as it's within the same realm of the credit, you can have as many as you want within a 2-week period. What does that mean? So let's say you're buying a house and they pull your credit score, right? But you want to check and make sure that they give you the best loan. You can go to another loan company, and what are they going to do? They're going to pull your credit score. And I've heard people say, well, no, you can't do that because I'm already pulled the credit score here. No, as long as it's for the same thing within a 2-week period, it doesn't affect your credit score. Make sense? So if you're buying a car, you're checking loan rates, you can check it 2 or 3 times, it's not a problem. But if you're checking for a car, for a house, and for a new lawnmower, now we got a problem, right? Because now you're having a lot more inquiries on different things. Or you're applying for a new credit card, at the same time you're applying for a house or a car or something else. So as long as it's within the same realm of what you're checking, they know that you can get a second opinion and that you might want to check your score, right? Or check inquiry. So not too many inquiries obviously would raise a flag. We just covered that. Derogatory remarks, monitor your credit and look out for false dates or ID. Okay, so I've been trying to correct this on my credit score. So I worked at Merrill Lynch from 1999 to 2002. One of the companies still has me working at Merrill Lynch. And I cannot, for the life of me, get it off of there. They still show me as Jose Palafox, Merrill Lynch financial advisor. Now, I am a financial advisor, so I guess that's okay, but obviously I'm not with Merrill Lynch and haven't been for over 2 decades now, I think. So they're not perfect. Okay. Any questions on debt before I move on to the next thing? Because, go ahead.
I read some things you listened to Dave Ramsey too. Kind of leads to believe that, you know, should you get credit, you should pay cash on some things. Kind of like don't. What we heard a lot of is you have to have some kind of credit you want that. You got to build or not. But then there's some. He had that university paid thing or something like that, and it taught you that you live basically without having credit.
Yeah.
So,
so your question is, should you get any credit if you've never had any?
Yeah.
Like I said, I like Dave Ramsey for a lot of things, but I think sometimes he's unrealistic. In today's society, unfortunately, if you don't have some kind of credit score, it's going to hurt you in the long run. Because eventually you're going to want to buy a house, right? And if that's the first thing you have on your credit, they're going to say, sorry, we can't lend you the money for a house.
If I'm not mistaken, a lot of that came from the 70s and the 80s because they want to keep track of all the money. So
Yeah.
they want to make sure it's
Yeah. So Demetrius is asking about should you get credit, because Dave Ramsey says pay cash as much as you can. First of all, I'm sure I'm not the first one to tell you this. Cash is going to be gone very soon. 29% of all transactions in the country are done on cash. That's it. The rest is on debit cards, credit cards, electronically. That's not a lot. I just heard that stat not that long ago, but blew me away. 29% of all transactions in America are done with cash.
right now there's a shortage.
That means 7 out of 10 are done electronically.
And there's that shortage of coins right now.
Yeah. If that doesn't scare you, it should, because you know what that comes next. We know Revelations, right? Anyways, so that's just a stat that I heard. Yes, sir.
You told me before you pay the first small, you know, when you have the small.
The smallest amount, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Paying them. You know, 10 years I have problems. I pay the small one. My wife see I take that, and she said, "Okay, we don't have too much. Let me buy this."
Yeah.
And
I see. So Sam says he's paying off the small credit, but then his wife uses it. Yeah. Well, I think we covered that under control your credit cards, right? Didn't we cover that? That says control credit cards. That's what that means. I didn't say control your wife. I said control credit cards. Yes. All right. Well, we have to have a special session, Sam. Yeah. Not for transaction purposes. That's an electronic transaction. No, what we mean is by the actual transaction, yes. It actually is coming out of a cash account per se, but it is an electronic transaction. It's not, because no cash is changing hands. That's what we mean by that. So yeah, so the number is really, really low up how much cash is actually. And actually, you know, up until a few years ago, if you handed somebody a 20 or 30 or 50, they're like, you know, happy to see it. Now they kind of look at you like, man, where's your card, right? You mean circulation? How much money is in circulation? Yeah, no, I don't have that figure, but that comes under M2, yeah. So there's different ways to keep track of money, M1, M2, M2, 404. what's in circulation, is actually not that much, absolutely. Not only that, but they destroy X amount of millions every day, basically. Yeah, so, okay. So if you don't have any questions on debt, it's very important. Go ahead, Dave, you have a question?
I don't have a question. I'm going to make a comment.
Go ahead.
I went to school when I was younger. I went to school for 16 years.
Uh-huh,
And nobody taught me anything about this stuff.
that's right.
If they had taught me, if you don't want to have debt, buy a farm. And after you get that paid off, build your wind farm, put wind in your farm. Buy a radio, no TV, don't have a telephone. Pay your debt and pay it back.
Yeah, but then you'd be in 1930. Dave says that if you don't want to be dead, you should buy a farm and then put a home on it and some windmills. Yeah. Dave, I would argue that I was in Nebraska in 1983 through 1986, and almost every farm almost went under because of the debt that they had. Yes. You're always in debt. I agree. And that's why it's so important that we remember whose money is it? That's right. All right. I saw a question up there from Gary.
Just a
Comment.
Even if you follow Dave's example, you're not completely dead, but you still got tax.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So Gary was saying that even if you own the farm and windmills and everything else, you still have taxes. Yes, absolutely. No, but it's very, very true that this is what I mean by risk in different times, right? So for instance, in the 80s, farms throughout the Midwest were a terrible investment. Horrible. People were in debt. People were losing stuff left and right. Of course, that's changed. Now today, one of the best investments is farmland. It's been that way for about a decade now. But it changes. It goes through cycles. Everything goes through a cycle. So let's talk about investing the money. We remember the parable of the talents and how, now if I got you out of debt, or at least you start to invest, one of the things that I want to teach about is the mathematical magic of compounded interest and the rule of 72. If all you learn is this through my whole thing, paying off your debt, making sure that you understand it's all God's, put him first, and then you learn this. The rule of 72 is very clear. It's a mathematical equation. Basically, you take the interest that you earn on your investment, you divide it into 72, and that's how many years it takes to double your money. Okay? Got that? So for instance, if you're earning 6%, right, which used to be easily to do, not so much today, but if you were, it would take 12 years to double your money, right? If you're earning 9% on the same investment, it only takes 8 years to double your money. So you can see the higher the interest rate, the lower the years, right? Because I always love it when somebody walks into my office and I always know they don't know anything about investing because they come in and say, Jose, I was recommended from a friend that I come talk to you, and I got $50,000. I'd really like to know how you could double it next week. Well, if I could double it next week, I wouldn't be here. Right? And if you look at the rule of 72, you can understand that you got to get a pretty sizable return to double your money, right? Here's the other thing. It works the opposite way too. So for instance, if you lose 50% of your investment, how much do you have to earn to make it up to break even? You lost 50%, how much do you have to make to get back to even? 100% of what's left, that's correct. So in other words, double, right? So one of the things we try to teach our clients and is that, yeah, we can make money in the markets because historically the markets, just so you know, if you invested back when the market started and you left your money alone in the markets, stocks, your average return for all those years combined is about 10.8%. Okay, that's just what it is. But it's not a straight 10.8%, right? Some years it's 30, some years it's negative 40, some years it's 10, some years 5. In fact, when they did that study, how many times in all the it's been 18, almost 200 years of the stock market, how many times has the market returned 10.8% in a year? Do you think? Never. How about that? Never. It's never been exactly 10.8. Just an average, right? So that was kind of a weird statistic. I don't know who took the time to learn that, but that's what it was. So rule of 72 is really important because as you invest your money, you also, the other thing that it does is it makes you understand you don't have to hit a home run. You don't have to double your money overnight to make money over long term, right? If you look at the stock market, for example, we said 10.8% is the average. So if that was the case every seven years or so, you're doubling your money. Well, if you start today, which is 2020, in 2027, whatever you invested today, theoretically, you would have double. But then here's where compounding interest comes, right? So if you invested 100,000 today, for example, 10,000, we'll use Dimitri, 10,000 today. In 7 years, you'd have, at 10%, 20,000, right? Yeah, so you're doubling it. So he says, hey, Jose, 20,000 in 7 years, I'd like to have it in about a year, right? But let's say it's 7 years. So you took 10,000, 7 years later, 10.8% return, now you have 20. Now 7 years after that, how much are you gonna have? 40, that's right, because it doubles again. So now 7 years after that, what do you have? 80, you see how quickly that is? That's compounding interest. So Einstein said, when asked to name the greatest invention in human history, he simply said compound interest, because it multiplies on itself, right? So the key is to let it run, go over time. I always love when people come into my office and say, I'm a long-term investor, I'm not really worried about my investments, I'm gonna be okay. Okay, great. How long are you gonna keep invested? Well, about a year. You are not a long-term investor. What do you mean? By the way, here's a nice statistic on long-term investing. In the 80s or so, the average holding that somebody held a stock was about 7.5 years. So in other words, they would buy a stock, they would hold it for about 7.5 years. What do you think that is today? It's about 7 days. That's the average. Yeah, unbelievable. Not a long. That's why the market's so volatile. Not all long-term investors, right? So, so if I could teach you one thing is that when you have investments, you don't have to hit home runs. You don't have to get 30% returns. You know, 5, 6%, little what we call singles. It all adds up over time, right? Go ahead, Fred. Yeah. So you're talking about real return versus average return. So Fred said the 10.8 has to be tempered because of inflation. That is true. We're not using that as part of the conversation, but absolutely. So we said that earlier, right? If you're making 16, but inflation's 18, you're really losing 2, right? So absolutely true. What we're doing here is just strictly the investment itself without real rate of return. What the average inflation is? Yes, it's about, over that time period, it's about 3.5. That's what it's average. You want to know what the average return for bonds is during that time? 6, believe it or not. Yeah. Since they've been keeping track, yeah, over 100 years. Over 100 years of bonds. Stock market's a little longer than that. Yeah, it's not that now. Now there's a thing called reversion to the mean, right? So for instance, if this is where people got caught up in 2005, where their house, they bought a house and then a year later it's worth 30% more, and then a year later it's 30% more, and they're like, yoo-hoo, this is great, fantastic, look at how great my house is doing. And then 2008 come along and, right, reversion to the mean. So you got this big giant up, and then it has to get back to where it's supposed to be, comes right back down. Oil is a classic example. It had $140 a barrel, right? You remember those days? Woohoo! Party like it's 1999. Oil is through the roof, right? Everybody's buying houses, everybody's doing everything. And then all of a sudden, what happened to the oil? $38 a barrel right now. Yeah. Negative not that long ago. Yeah, negative. Actually, it went negative. That's called reversion to the mean. So one of the reasons the stock market is average 10.8. So if you have a year where it's 30%, or maybe you have 2 years in a row with 30%, should you be investing? If reversion to the mean comes true, probably not, right? Because you got to get back to 10.8. So the rule of 72 is really important, and how the best way I think to get it is through the stock market. Now, let me see if I can. You guys can write this down. This is kind of a little bit about, I'm not against real estate, but I want to kind of use an example because it's actually really important that people understand that although real estate does go up, it's not really that great of an investment. And I know I get pushback on that all the time. So here's my example. I have a client. They live in Silicon Valley, which is the best real estate there is really in the country. I mean, things just fly off the shelves there, right? So she bought a condo, 1,100 square feet. How much? 50,000? I'm gonna use rough figures because it's easier, but because actually her return was worse than this, but we're gonna go ahead. It's 1,100 square feet. Yeah. Silicon Valley, 1,100 square feet. What do you think? 600,000. Yes, 600,000. That's what they paid for it. And that was 11 years ago, but for our illustration, we're going to use 10. That makes the numbers better, but so today, how much do you think they can sell it for? No, not that much. That'd be good though. That'd be a heck of an investment. Any guesses? 1,100 square feet. You can go get it right now in Silicon Valley. 900,000. Yeah, it got up to about 990, but we'll use 900,000. So they paid 600. It's worth 900. How much did they make? 300,000, right? And 300,000 is what percentage of 600,000? 50%. So in a 10-year period, they made 50%. Pretty good? Yes? No? Maybe? Better than Texas at real estate, right? During that same time. Sounds really good. Okay. And she was all excited. She goes, Jose, I did really good. This is fantastic. I don't need to sell my stuff. I'm doing great. I'm like, okay, let's see. So she made 50% over 10 years. Divided by 10 is how many a year? How much did she make a year? 5%. So less than the market already, but 5%. But wait a minute. She didn't own it outright. She had a mortgage, did she not? So you got to back out the mortgage, right? So minus the mortgage. And California is known for what? That's right. They love you if you're a homeowner. So taxes, right? But guess what? In most condos, there's a HOA, right? So you got to pay for HOA. And by the way, it was an older condo, so how much of the repairs were taken care of? So maintenance, right? So you have maintenance. So you have maintenance, taxes, insurance, right? Got to put down insurance because you got to insure your property. I know what you're thinking, Dan, but you're actually wrong, but I'll correct it in a second. Okay, but let me go. Let me finish my thing. So we know she made 50%. We know she made 300,000. But when it was all said and done, I backed up the taxes, I backed up the mortgage, I backed up what do you think her return actual total return was? In the best real estate market in the country.
Something happened to the sound?
Seems so. Not hearing anything.
We can't hear you.
No, ma'am.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. I feel like Verizon. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we're getting close to the late, and then I'll discuss why I said that. But you can see that it could fool us into thinking that it's a great investment, but when you actually do the numbers, not so good, right? And so when I was showing her, it's not that she made a bad investment. It was actually okay. It's better than most. But the reality is, when you actually look at percentage-wise, because we're looking at the rule of 72, and we want to make sure that we're able to use the compounding interest, her compounding interest was really about 1%. Not all that great, really, when it's all said and done. Now, I get this argument from people all the time. Yeah, but Jose, I have to live somewhere, right? And it's a savings and this and that and the other. Well, let me tell you, that's true. But when you're renting, the opposite happens, right? First of all, the risk goes to who? The landlord, right? Second, yes, you're paying for somewhere to live, but you got to pay for somewhere to live anyways. Two, when I was in the apartment, and I'm kind of jealous of that right now, is that if something goes out, I call the maintenance and say, hey, my light bulb went out. They go in, change the light bulb, right? It's already included in the cost. The other thing too is that in a lot of the apartment complexes today, for example, it's like a Mandalay Bay. I mean, they have like tennis courts, they have pools, they have, I mean, it's not like before, like when I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with cockroaches. True story. True story. I was afraid to turn on the light at night. Not like that anymore. Right? It's not like that anymore. I mean, so when you weigh, so I guess what I'm saying to you is that, yes, do I think you should own a house? I'm not saying no. But what I'm saying is your house is where you live is not an investment. Too many people think that it's an investment. It's not. Not when you break down the numbers, right? Now, there's many times that you come out ahead with that, but if you pay for a mortgage for 30 years, you basically doubled what you paid for it. So if you bought a $100,000 house, you pay $200,000 after 30 years. And if you bought it a long time ago, your interest rate was really high, it's even more than that, right? Today, it's about that number. So we started with debt, finished with a little bit of investing. Next week, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, is, unless I have some questions tonight, I know what you really want to hear, and that is, how do you invest in the market, right? What's the safe way to invest in the market or reduce the risk is what we like to say, right? And we'll cover that next week. We'll cover, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. One of the things that Dave Ramsey says, which I don't agree with, but he says, oh, once you get out of debt, then you should just invest in stock mutual funds, right? Because they return 12.8% annually. Stock mutual funds. I've yet to see that investment, but that's what he says. So this is a funny story. So I had a client who went to the Dave Ramsey program, and he said, Jose, I did the Dave Ramsey, I'm done to the point, and now I want you to invest all my money in stock mutual funds. I said, well, you're already invested in the stock market. He goes, no, I want stock mutual funds. So let me get this straight. You want something that's more expensive to do the same thing we're already doing. Like, what do you mean? I'll leave you with that hanging for next week. All right, let's close this out. Unless there's any questions online. We good? All right. Dear Lord, Father God, we're ever so thankful for this time that you've given us to come together, and hopefully that we're able to learn. And most of all, we know that you're in charge of everything. And we're thankful for sending your son and dying for our sins. Without that, we would not be ever near you. And we're thankful for that, Lord. We just pray that you take care of us, watch over us this week as we all get back to the church later on this week. Lord, I'm so thankful for the beautiful day that you've given us today, for this time that you give us to fellowship together. I ask for everything in your name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, and so long.
Yes.
Bye, Miss Gigi.
Bye.